Story 1. This happened when I worked at a water park. The rules were very clear. Children under the age of 12 are not allowed to enter the pools or use the slides and rides without adult supervision. The only exception to this rule is the family water playground, where there are no pools or large slides. One day, a mother left her children, approximately a 10-year-old boy, a 5-year-old girl, and a 3-year-old girl, alone in the pool while she was resting on a lounge chair in the shade, around 200 meters away. The boy had a pool noodle, while the 2 younger girls were floating with the help of life vests. One of my coworkers approached her and explained that she needed to be with her children while they were in the water. The mother replied that in her situation, the rule did not apply. She argued that since the children were wearing flotation vests, they couldn't possibly drown, and that she herself was recovering from surgery and could not go into the water. Despite her explanation, my coworker firmly insisted that she remove her children from the pool. Less than 10 minutes later, the children were back in the water. This time, I went over to her and told her again that she needed to get them out, or they would have to leave the park entirely. She began to argue once more, claiming that her circumstances made her an exception. She reiterated that the children were wearing vests and insisted they were safe. I explained that flotation vests are not intended to allow toddlers to be left alone in the water, and that even with them, drowning could still occur. She became visibly upset and called her husband on the phone. While she was doing that, my coworker and I removed the children from the pool and called our supervisor to handle the situation. When her husband arrived, he was clearly agitated. He began yelling at me, asking what his wife was supposed to do since she had recently undergone abdominal surgery. He said it was unreasonable to expect her to go into the water. I calmly responded that perhaps a water park was not the best place for his wife to spend time with their children while she was recovering. I also asked why he hadn't come with them earlier to supervise the children himself. They then accused us of being discriminatory and threatened to take legal action. I later found out from a friend who works at a local television station that the family had tried to get their story broadcast, but the station declined to air it. The family also had their attorney contact the water park's management. In response, the manager simply sent them a copy of the terms of use, which had been clearly posted when the mother purchased her ticket. The terms clearly state that under no circumstances are children under the age of 12 allowed in the water without adult supervision. After that, the manager never heard from them again. Story 2. So this happened 3 years ago, way before the pandemic had started. Thus, live streaming at funerals was extremely weird back then. My aunt, by marriage to my uncle, has always been quite entitled. It had always been very clear to my entire family from the start that she mainly married my uncle for his money and expected to always be treated like a princess by him and everyone else around her, and always got a horrible attitude whenever things didn't go exactly as she wanted. My mother had just passed away from cancer after only having been diagnosed a few months prior, and we were doing final preparations for her funeral that would take place the next day. Note, I was just 19 during this time, and with everything that had happened, I of course already was not in the best state of mind. I was very much grieving the loss of my mother, who I was extremely close to, and just wanted everything to go as smoothly as possible, without any hassle of disturbances that could potentially make me even more stressed out and depressed. Thus, I decided that I did not want to have young children at the funeral, at least not during the reception and the speeches. Young children make lots of noise, especially when it's very quiet, and they are in negative environments where there is a lot of sadness, and when they aren't the center of their parents' attention. I didn't want anything to disturb the reception and the people who wanted to give a speech about my mother, and thus I did not want any young children to attend. Everyone who got invited for the funeral with young children was very understanding and did not make any fuss about it. Everyone except for my aunt. I first told my uncle that I didn't want any young children to attend the funeral a few days before, and thus asked him if he could make sure he got a babysitter for his 1-year-old son. He appeared to not have any problem with it and said he'd tell my aunt about it. That night, I got a text from him asking why I didn't want any young children to attend. I explained the above-mentioned reasons to him, and then he asked if I couldn't make an exception for his son. I found this to be very odd and very annoying, and said that I would not be making any exceptions for anyone. The following day in the evening, I received yet another text message from him. Yet this time it had very emotionally manipulative undertones to it. He said something along the lines of, "Please don't make this time harder on us than it already is, and allow us to take our son with us," and "You're letting your emotions over your mother's loss cloud your judgment," which absolutely infuriated me. So come the day before the funeral. My aunt and uncle had still refused to get a babysitter for their son, and we were discussing it in the reception hall of the funeral home. This time my aunt was present, and she asked me once again to allow her son to attend. I once again said no and asked them to drop it because I wasn't going to change my mind. My nephew's girlfriend even offered to babysit their son for the duration of the reception. It was literally only going to be for 2 hours. My aunt flat out refused her offer, and once again said that she wanted her son to attend. Then when I once again told her that there were no young children allowed, and that my decision was final, she threw a temper tantrum bigger than her 1-year-old infant would ever be able to throw. She started crying, saying that I was being unfairly cruel to her, and outright started to demand that her son attend my mother's funeral or else she wouldn't. She stormed outside with her son in the pram. Yes, she also took him with him during the funeral preparations, and started crying and yelling at my family members. While we had literally just lost my mother not even 1 week ago. My uncle didn't say anything and just followed her outside, and eventually left with her and met me and the rest of my family to finish up the preparations by ourselves. We were absolutely livid, and I was at the verge of breaking down into tears myself at that point. So, the day of the funeral arrived and my aunt and her son were absent. My uncle arrived alone, because I was of course preoccupied by my grief and the funeral itself. I at first didn't pay much attention to my uncle, but after my nephew had given his speech about my mother, he whispered to me that our uncle was holding his phone up high, appearing to be recording everything. When I looked at him, I saw that he was indeed doing exactly that, and asked him if he could stop recording since it was making people uncomfortable and looked very rude and weird. He then said that he was live streaming it for my aunt, and that if we had only allowed his son to attend, he wouldn't have had to do this. Yes, he literally said that. I was too emotionally exhausted to cause a scene at that point, but I was absolutely livid. Thankfully, the rest of the funeral went smoothly, and my uncle immediately left after the reception and speeches. He didn't even bother to talk to the rest of the family members and attendees afterwards. Needless to say, I pretty much cut them out of my life after that, and to this day they have never apologized to me for their behavior. Story 3. My boss, who also happens to be my uncle by marriage, and I were out early doing some shopping for Thanksgiving. After we finished, he realized he had forgotten something and went back to grab it while I sat down on a bench to play a game on my phone. I was trying to catch a lava eel in Stardew Valley when 2 people suddenly sat down on either side of me. I looked up and instantly recognized them, my father and my stepmother. Standing right in front of me was my brother. My heart sank in an instant. If you haven't heard the stories about my twin sister, let me explain a bit. My sister has always been treated as the golden child by both my father and my stepmother. Their favoritism toward her ran so deep that the rest of my father's children resented her, and instead of confronting her directly, they took all of that hatred out on me. Panic set in fast. I tried to get up from the bench, but both my biological father and his wife forcefully grabbed me and shoved me back down. They began to dig their nails into my skin and whisper extremely disturbing things into my ears. This wasn't new, they used to do that to me when I was a child as a twisted form of public humiliation and psychological torment. They whispered that I was useless, that I was ungrateful, and that I would give all my money to my sister. They called me disgusting, among other terrible things. I'm the most emotionally sensitive out of all my father's children, and combined with my autism, it doesn't take much to emotionally destabilize me. As their nails pierced into my skin, drawing blood, something inside me screamed, "Hey, hey, did you forget you're pregnant? Protect yourself." That snapped me into action. I bit my stepmother's arm and hit my father with my LG Stylo 5 phone. I tried to escape, but didn't get far before my brother grabbed me by the wrist. The way he gripped me triggered an immediate post-traumatic stress response. I froze, fell into a mental loop, and started apologizing uncontrollably. I kept saying I was sorry, begging for help, and screamed for my boss to come find me, because he's the one person who makes me feel safe when I'm in distress. Employees in the area tried to step in and help, but my father told them that they had caught me stealing. Then, without hesitation, he slapped me across the face, claiming it was for breaking the law. That pushed me even deeper into my trauma response. All the worst memories I had been suppressing came flooding back at once. When my brother reached toward my face, I thought he was trying to hurt me again. Thankfully, my good brother, the one I actually trust, had given me a pocket knife for self-defense a while ago, and I had just recently found it again. In a panic, I stabbed my brother in the hand with it. After that, everything became a blur. I don't remember what happened next. I curled up into a ball on the floor and completely lost my composure. It was my boss who helped pull me out of that breakdown. He's the only man who can physically touch me when I'm having an episode without making things worse. When I came back to reality, I explained everything to him. I was terrified for my life. Long story short, my father, stepmother, and brother were arrested. I was left with a sprained wrist and visible scars on my body from where they had dug their nails into my skin. But out of all the awful things that happened, what hurt me the most was what came next. My twin sister called me. She didn't ask how I was doing. She didn't ask if I was safe. Instead, she started yelling at me, calling me names, furious that I had gotten Daddy arrested. I was shocked. I'm not okay. I keep flinching every time my fiancé tries to touch me. I'm heartbroken, and yet, here she was, more concerned about our father and stepmother than about me, the person who was assaulted. I'm the one who was physically attacked. I'm the one who went through that terrifying experience. I'm the victim here. What on earth is going on? And the most unbelievable part, my sister wants me to pay their bail. Yes, you read that right, after everything they did to me. She's demanding I pay to get them out of jail. I can't even wrap my head around that. It's like she's living in a completely different reality where none of what happened to me matters. I'm planning to talk to my therapist in the morning because this entire situation has clearly set me back. I feel like I'm constantly in a state of fight or flight. My mother, who has always been my rock, is absolutely livid. She told me she wants to give someone a piece of her mind, and if you knew her, you'd understand how hilarious it is when a proper French lady gets that angry. Thankfully, my real family, the people who truly love and support me, are standing by my side. I know I'll be okay eventually, even if I don't know when that will be. Right now, I'm just trying to take things one day at a time and focus on healing from everything that happened. Story 4. My teacher cut the tube for my insulin pump because we couldn't have headphones in class. This happened when I was in middle school, back in the days of wired headphones, so about 2011 or something. I've 24 currently been a type 1 diabetic since I was about 4 years old, and I use a continuous glucose monitor and an insulin pump. I had an EAP, so all my teachers were told about it, and that I would need my insulin pump in class, that it might make noise and I might have to pull it out of my pocket and mess with it if I needed insulin, or I might need to drink a juice pouch, and I was able to do so at my discretion. We had one teacher who was a complete hard *SS for no reason. She was notorious for making kids cry during presentations. She even told one girl who wanted to be a doctor to find a cure for cancer because her little sister had childhood cancer that she would need to actually be smart to do that, while chuckling to herself. Let a kid dream, man. We were like 12 years old. As you can imagine, she was also at war with technology. And on a side note, these days I use my phone to check my glucose and give myself an insulin bolus. I can't imagine being a kid today and dealing with a teacher like that when the lines are blurred and your smartphone actually is a life-saving medical device. But anyway, if you're not familiar with insulin pumps, the kind I use has a little tube that connects the pump which has the insulin to my body which needs the insulin. This teacher also liked to be weirdly obtuse about things. Instead of being like other teachers and simply saying something like, "No cell phones in class, put it on my desk," which would allow me to remind them it's an insulin pump, and they'd usually say something like, "That's right, my bad," she would instead try and talk abstractly about what she wanted to happen while walking around the room. So this particular day, she kept alluding to students listening to music in class, that you should be careful what you do because she can see it. That us kids think we're so sneaky, but the adults know what we're up to. I obviously wasn't listening to music, so I figured she'd seen someone with headphones in the room, and the next thing I know she had snuck up behind me with scissors. It took me a good moment to realize what exactly had happened because I was astonished. I was used to teachers thinking I had a cell phone or getting upset about my pump beeping during an exam, but no one had ever touched it before, much less cut my life-sustaining tube. I was actually sitting with my mouth agape, and she turned to me, now that she was at the front of the class again, and said something along the lines of, "Mr. Wonderelli, care to share what tunes are more important than listening to class?" I'd at this point put together that she thought I was listening to music. She thought she cut my headphone wires. I replied, "Just the sound of my thoughts, while I've still got any, since that was my insulin pump." She had to let me go to my locker to get my cell phone to call my mom to bring me a new infusion set. My parents insisted no cell phones until high school, but my mom was also scared with me being T1D and too dyslexic to remember a phone number and wanted me to easily be able to call her, so she got me a $15 Walmart phone and put minutes on it, and now I feel old. Then I just waited in the front office for her. She worked from home and drove like a bat out of H*LL. She was so angry. I don't ever want to see her that angry again in my life. It took 10 years off of me, and I wasn't even in trouble. The teacher had apologies to me, and all the teachers got some more disability accommodation training or something. Kinda anticlimactic end, but a friend thought it was entertaining, and that I should share. Edit. I'm going to put some of my comments here so no one has to dig if you want more information. Yes, she knew I had a pump. I had an EAP, and my teachers were given the information they needed to know about my diabetes. Even still, a lot of non-diabetics just don't get it, or they forget. It would happen a lot, and teachers would ask for my phone if they saw me messing with it under the desk. Really, I was going through a thing and embarrassed about being diabetic, so I would often try and hide it, so I get how they thought I had a phone. But a simple reminder it's a pump was enough for every other teacher. Yes, she did get really close to me. I was facing the front of the room to look at the projector screen and to take notes. She snuck up behind me from the back of the room where she was lecturing at us from and reached her arm down towards me with the scissors. I didn't notice her doing that. Kids used to keep their iPod or whatever in their pocket and then run their headphones up under their shirt. It sometimes left a little bit of the wire peeking out from their pocket to get to their shirt. That's where she cut. The pump was down at my waist. In terms of her apology, it wasn't too bad. We had a meeting with her, the principal, assistant principal, and a lady from the special education office, plus me and my parents. She said she was sorry for her actions and that she shouldn't have treated me that way, and she hopes I don't grow up to expect people to act like that towards me. She forgot I had a pump, but I didn't feel like she was making an excuse. She was saying she should have been more mindful, and it was her fault, and that I did nothing wrong. She also said I was brave and calm in the face of adversity. Stuff like that. And then she apologized to my mom and dad for frightening them, and for any costs. She offered to pay for it, but they declined. They wanted all the teachers to get more education about kids with diabetes, and the school had like a nurse diabetes educator or someone come in to talk to the teachers. No, my parents didn't sue her or the school. No, she wasn't fired. Yes, I still had to be in her class. And yes, I did have extra supplies kept in the nurse's office. But I also just really wanted my mom in that moment because I was a kid. This was a tiny school and did a lot of backwards things. They mishandled my learning disability as well. And one year one of my teachers was surprised my dad has mild cerebral palsy and thought it must be so tough for me having to deal with that, and would talk to him like he was 5 during student-teacher conferences. He's an engineer. Edit 2. When my mom showed up, I was sitting in the office waiting for her. I think it took her like 15 minutes to get their post-phone call. She asked me if I was okay and checked out the damage that was done. I could tell she was mad. Not with me, obviously. She walked straight up to the receptionist and just asked where the teacher was, and they phoned the classroom and had my teacher come to the office. The principal also came out. My mom ripped her a new one, but she didn't yell, though I honestly think that made it more terrifying that she was very collected. I don't remember word for word, but basically she said that removing my insulin pump was a violation of my EAP, not to mention that it is a medical device and an extension of my body which is keeping me alive, and that she would have the audacity to damage life-saving medical equipment was reckless and criminal. That type 1 diabetes is no joke and takes lives. That she should count herself lucky she didn't damage the pump itself, and she let her know how expensive they are and everything they had to do to get me one. She's had years of practice having to argue to take food into places they don't let you take outside food, or in the airport that I can't take my pump through scanners, etc. She was very practiced at putting the fear of God into people, but in a way that they can't turn it on her and say she's being disruptive. Then she took me home for the rest of that day. Story 5. So I went to my old job today to handle some business not related to work at all, because they are the closest place I could go to deal with what needed to be done. I walk in and handle my business, chatting with the only ex-coworker I still talk to. My old manager comes out when she hears I am there and greets me in her sickeningly sweet voice that is so fake it hurts. Now, before I share the conversation, here's some backstory. The company provides handouts, flyers, and signage for all sales and promotions. However, once my manager found how skilled I am in design, she would have me create personalized promotional materials for our store. Not to toot my own horn too much, but they were quite successful. To make everyone's life easier, I created multiple files that needed extremely simple edits that could be used for just about any occasion. So if I was not in when they were needed, anyone could make the changes. I also made files for personal touches, like thank you to customers for using our services that were made for weddings, birthdays, funerals, etc. All in, I had made roughly 50 files for these uses. They were my personal creations that were in no way tied to the company, and in truth, I believe the company forbade stores from doing such things since they gave us promotional materials approved for use. I was never given any credit for my work, and was even told to my face during my review that netted me a lovely 1% raise. Company average was 5%. That my work was nothing that she or someone else couldn't have done, so it didn't justify a raise. So here is the conversation as it transpired. Manager will be known as Karen. Karen to me. Hi, long time no see. Me. Hi. Yes, it's been a while. Well, I was going to call you, but I didn't want to get you in trouble at your new job. I had a question for you. At this point, I am rolling my eyes and finally fully turn to face her. Remember all those files you made for sales and such? Well, we can't find them on the computer. We wanted to use them for such and such sale. What folder did you put them in? Cue huge smile under my mask. Well, as I created those files, when I left, I deleted everything that was mine from the machine. Why would you delete them since we use them all the time? Me. You made it quite clear that my work was unappreciated and nothing I did was special. As you felt that way, I didn't think you needed my files for use since it was apparently something that anyone could do. Kay, this is a serious problem. You deleted our work files without permission. Actually, I deleted my files. I created every last one of them. Not one was created by the company, nor were they approved for use by anyone higher than you. There is nothing wrong with me deleting anything that was made by me for my personal use. Besides, there was nothing there that you or anyone else couldn't produce, right? Stunned silence. However, if you want those files, I can give you my designer rate for each one, and you can submit them as a store expense. I'll be happy to recreate them for you once I have a paid invoice for the work. You have my number, so let me know. I said see you later to my coworker and walked out. The breath of fresh air never felt more satisfying as the door closed behind me. Story 6. So for context, I have Tourette's syndrome. My most common at work is a meow-like squeak. Now, something important to know about Tourette's is if you mimic someone's tics, or you tick yourself or do something tick-like, you can force them to tick, and it can get very bad. Tourette's isn't all that cute if you actually know about it. Forcing too many tics can result in ticsing so much you stop breathing and pass out. You can get what I call stuck tics, where you can't stop doing one tick for an extended period of time. Or the worst-case scenario, triggering a tic attack, which can, and for me it does, look like a grand mal seizure that can last up to 4 hours. I live in Ohio, so there are a lot of Christians, and most people don't understand my tics. And since I work as a cashier and see hundreds of people a day, I get people offering to pray for me at least once a week. It's not all that unusual. I always say yes, and then they go home and I assume add me into their nightly prayers. I don't mind, and if it's what they feel they need to do, who am I to stop them? I try my best to keep my verbal tics to sounds, not words, at work, which is difficult, but I pull it off, and if I can't, I cover my mouth to muffle some really bad or some just not family-friendly things I say. I'm also non-confrontational to a fault. People scare me, so I act like a doormat. Okay, down to the story. It started off as a pretty standard interaction. A guy came up to my register, and I asked him to put his mask on. He complied and asked what the noise was. So I told him I have Tourette's, and he looked weirdly gleeful and asked if he could pray for me, so I said yes. And this is where it got weird. Apparently his religion is the one where you twitch and shout in tongues because Jesus is possessing you. He started twitching and trying to make me copy him, saying a bunch of weird stuff like promising my soul in exchange for Jesus to possess me and free me from the demons who were inhabiting my body. At this point, I was really uncomfortable, and one of the kids I work with, he's a tall, big-looking dude, came over and stood there. He didn't know what to do, but I appreciated the solidarity and that he was there in case it got worse. The guy kept doing this twitch stomp thing with his whole body that forced me to do it, and that made him really excited. But he wouldn't let me claim I was saying the words in my head because you might really be thinking that you don't accept Jesus and you need to accept him in order for him to possess you and get rid of the demons inside of you. At this point, I was having a lot of trouble standing upright, and I was scared. I looked around and saw my manager, who is a mama bear, and all the cashiers are her ducklings. I couldn't catch her eye, so behind my back, I started desperately trying to wave her over. She came over, guns a-blazing, seeing what was happening, and told me to go sit down, behind the service desk, basically hide, and also that's where I go when I'm gonna have a tic attack, and I could barely stand because of this dude, and the guy flipped his crap. Getting mad and yelling at her about how she stopped Jesus, and how is he supposed to exorcise my demons when she stopped Jesus? You can't get in the way of Jesus. And she responded by firmly and loudly saying I was going to have a seizure, simplified version of me having a tic attack, and he was still flipping his crap and tried to insist I check out his items and that you can't stop Jesus. She pointed to a register far away from mine and told him he could check out there. After checking out, he was shooed out of the store and my tics were bad. He came back a few minutes later saying he was in town for a witch convention and I needed to let him exorcise the demons out of me. I was twitching like crazy and scared of this guy. My two managers stood in between me and the guy and told him to leave. He asked if I wanted him to leave and I meekly said, yes please, and eventually he got shooed out of the store and didn't come back. But the damage was done. I got my arms stuck in a tic and could barely use them for 45 minutes, and eventually they switched tics and I couldn't use them for another 2 hours. We honestly thought we were going to have to abandon my car and a coworker was going to drive me home. Eventually, I figured out how to teach my managers how to do a reset on me, basically forcing me to do tics that are really hardwired into my brain to get me unstuck. And I was able to use my hands again, instead of swinging them like a skier. But he gave me a stomping tic, so I had to wait in my car for another 45 minutes before I could drive without stomping the gas pedal. Now I'm home, I'm exhausted, irritated, and in pain because he wanted to exercise the Tourette's out of me.